Okay, so here, the next step is to make a grommet. Now, here's a grommet that I made some time ago, and it's kind of, these are really neat. You will find they are super, super simple to make. And so this grommet, why would you use one of these? The answer is if you're making a stereo cabinet, and I question whether anybody ever makes stereo cabinets anymore. That's an old term that old people use. You know, I don't think anybody uses that stuff anymore unless you still have one in a house someplace. But if you're making a desk, if you're making shelves, you want to put some electronic equipment on the shelf and have a hole for the cables to go through down below to go wherever they have to go, power or whatever, then, you know, instead of having just cutting a hole in the top board in the shelf and having a sharp edge here that might be a little, you know, kind of chafing on your cable, you can make a grommet that will go in there, and that softens that edge and makes it very nice and looks good. It is not going to chafe the cables, and I think it'll be a very good addition to your piece. So what I'm going to make one that fits this hole, the smaller one. So the way to do this, you know, if you have a hole, if someone comes to you and says, look, I need something that'll go in a hole. I'm making some shelves, and I want to put a piece of electronic equipment on, run the cables down through. How can I keep that edge from chafing? You're a wood turner. Can you come up with a solution? The answer is, sure I can. I'm a wood turner. You said it yourself. And the answer is, you're going to make one just like that. So you need to know the size of the hole your friend is using or you're using in your furniture making. And take a little piece of plywood and cut the same size hole in it. That just makes it a lot easier to, as you're cutting this, to hold it up against the lathe and be sure it fits. I found that it's very hard to hold up a whole set of shelves against the lathe to see if it fits, but you can use a little piece of plywood. So you see this just fits in there very nicely. And that's what you're looking for. So there's my guide for that particular size hole. So once again, I resort to my screw chuck to make these. I'm going to put this back on the lathe. We probably both wonder why I took it off in the first place. And I want to take this top off. I'm going to unscrew this, my spacer. Don't need that. I want to unscrew those top and bottom. That's why you need two of these bars too. So you can unscrew the collar from that. So you want to figure out what size you're going to want. And the answer is even, you know, this size is a little big, but because of the way I'm going to mount this, it won't matter. So I'm going to turn this around and have the smaller size out. Now, in order for the demo, I made a couple of blanks out of poplar. And, you know, poplar is inexpensive wood. It's a great wood. If they're going to be painted perfect, I can't imagine anybody wanting a nice turned grommet out of poplar and painting it, but it could happen. Otherwise, they use whatever you want. I drilled a hole, clear through it, so you know it can go right here. I'm just going to screw that on. I am going to put that spacer back on. And you'll see why in a moment. get that on pretty tight so that it's flush all the way around. And because it's going to be important to have that way. First thing I'm going to do is make this round down to my final size. So I'm going to use a set of calipers and measure this particular grommet right there. There, that's the size I'm looking for. And you can see I have a little ways to go. So I'm going to cut that down. Let me get suited up here once again. And I'll use my bowl gouge to cut through it. First I want to just round it off. And then see how close I am to the size. Still a little fat, so I'm going to use my parting tool and cut a little groove here, trying to get right down to what the size I want for the top, the outside, the fattest part. There. And that works just fine. So now I just need to match that. And then come back with the bowl gouge and cut that down. And of course, when you're turning, you know, you're cutting down here at this spot, but that's not where you look. You look down there to be sure you're cutting right, but look up here at the top of it to see the result of what you're doing. The result is very important to keep track of. And now I'm going to come in here, just square that top off a little bit. Looks like that's still just not quite square, which means the top is not quite the right size there. So the next step is to determine how long the skirt is. And I call this part that goes down into the hole the skirt of the grommet. And I want to know how long that is. And in this particular case, it's 3/4 of an inch. In this particular case, my blank is 3/4 of an inch. That's not going to work. Okay, so what I'm going to do is reduce that about 1/8 of an inch and make this about 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so take my measuring device here, my marking device, and called a pencil, and mark where that's how long that skirt's going to be. And the next step then is to determine the width of this skirt. So it's just there. I'm going to make it just a hair bigger. I want it to go across there very easily because I want to make this too big and then sneak up on it to get it the right size. So the first tool I use is, once again, my 1/8 inch parting tool. Come in here like this. So you see I have my parting tool held in one hand, my finger out here to help stabilize it. And I'm holding the calipers in the other hand and working down to the size that those calipers tell me is the right size. Here's something else that's real important. Let me turn this off a minute. Whenever you're using calipers and you're trying to cut something down to the right size, you need to be really careful. You don't want to have one leg of your calipers on your place where you're cutting and the other leg up here where it's not the right size. I've done that. So I know, because now you're suddenly you're down here before it goes in. Now instead of this being this size, it's an inch, and you know you've just screwed that one up. And you realize you had your calipers cockeyed across the place where you're trying to cut. So be sure you got the calipers in the right place. Okay. I'm going to need that again in just a moment. So what I want to do now, just I've got my little plywood ring here. Let me just check. I want that too big, and it is too big. Good. It's too big. I don't want it to be the right size yet, because what I want to do is go down the other side just under where that pencil mark was and define the skirt. So I can go in here. The calipers are narrow enough that I can use an 1/8 inch parting tool and go through there, and I've got the right size. I don't need the calipers anymore. Now I'm going to revert to my bowl gouge. And why bowl gouge? Well, the reason is because this is like bowl orientation, okay? Faceplate orientation. The fibers are going this way, not this way like in a spindle. So the bowl gouge seems to be better suited to cut fibers when they're in this direction. So I go in here like this. I don't want to go clear through. Why don't I want to go clear through? I want to leave this little edge right there. Why is that? The answer is that if I try to go through there, I'm putting pressure on it. As I go through it, suddenly I can break through and jam into the upper part. And I've just damaged the bottom of the flare around the top. So I just go up, leave that thin. I can go back in like this and cut straight in and clean that off. Come back in here and follow that. Oh, there, I just did it. You see, I was just telling you about it. And it was not easy to effect a perfect demonstration of a mistake, but I did that for you, and I hope you appreciate that. Okay, so I've got the skirt almost there. The next step is double check again, see about how far off. I'm quite a ways off, so I'm going to be a little more aggressive than I should, perhaps. Here's where you got to sneak up on it and see. Oh man, how often does that happen? The perfect fit the first time, perfect, perfect. But let me see if I can squeeze, clean up the rest of it and make it the same way. So I don't think this is going to go all the way up. Yeah, it gets a little fat up there. So I'm going to skin that off just a little bit, just by slightly scraping back and forth, just a little bit on the upper part of the skirt. Doesn't take much. And it does, it goes all the way up. So there you can see it's clear to the top. So I'm going to pull that back off. So I'm going to pull that back off. So I'm pulling this, there we are, good, good, good. And the next step then is to hollow out the center. What I have found in doing an awful lot of these is that I want, where are we, here we are, that I want this part, the thickness right here, to be about 1/8 of an inch. What I found is if that's about 1/8 of an inch, then that is plenty strong, it's plenty thick, it does just fine, and it does not take up a whole lot of space in the hole. A thought I just had, and I've, you need to be sure, if somebody comes to you and wants a grommet for a table they're making or a cabinet, something, you need to be sure that they know what size to make that hole. If you have an electrical plug, the plug is going to have to go down through that hole. And if they make the hole so the electrical plug just fits through it, and then they want a grommet in the middle of it, suddenly it may be too small and that electrical plug may not fit through it. So, you need to be sure to coordinate that part of it. So once you determine what the size is going to be, then you can go ahead and turn the inside. This is basically no different than hollowing a bowl. Okay. One other tool I didn't get out. Let me see if I can find it real quickly. And here it is. Good. We'll use that in a moment. So I want to know how deep I am. You can see why I didn't want to have that screw chuck go clear into the bottom, because I want to hollow out wood from in here. So the screw chuck comes in part way, but not clear to the bottom. So it's easier to hollow that. The next step is to determine how deep that is. And I can put my little measuring device right up in here, my ruler, and I can see that evens up right at 1/2 inch. So if I put 1/2 inch on the outside, I'm still a good fat 1/8 inch from even getting to the bottom of the flare at the top. So I can take out a lot more wood, and will do so. But usually about this point, I revert to a scraper. And this is the scraper I use. It's a box scraper, and it's really terrific. A box scraper is meant to use down the side of a box. And you see here is the shaft. I'm trying to get this oriented correctly. So that's easier. Thank you, Ray. Here's the shaft of my scraper. But at this point, it suddenly angles off this direction. And then at the top, I have a 90-degree corner right here. So this top is angled also, but that gives me a 90-degree angle at the top. Why would I want this side tapered? And the answer is, if I go into a box, I want that side to scrape straight down in the box, but I don't want the rest of this in the way. So I can use that to go in and scrape and cut with the edge, and the rest of the tool is out of the way. It's a scraper. I want to cut at an angle downhill, so I'm going to raise my tool rest just a tad. A tad, that's an engineering term, I think, isn't it, David? Isn't tad an engineering term?
I would say so.
Yeah, I thought it was. So I'm going to go in here. I want to just scrape down in a little bit. Okay. Now here's an important hint. The slower you cut, the slower you move the tool across the wood, the better surface you will get. If you are too aggressive scraping in here like this, you will get a lot of tear out. It's a sharp tool, but it'll still do tear out. It's a scraper. It's going to tear out the wood. But if you sharpen that up and move slowly and don't cut a deep cut, you will get a lot better cut. So let me show you what I mean. So my thickness is about right. I I've left it a little fat because I do want to be able to scrape some of that away and make that just a little smaller. So I'm going to go in here. This angled side is straight in, and I'm going to cut just a tad, tiny bit right there, very slowly. Do not rush this. It makes a lot of difference. If you take it very slowly, you will save yourself time. Isn't that something? That if you do it slowly, you save yourself time? It's like rushing any job. If you rush a job, what happens? You have to do it over if you screw it up. But here, I've gone in very slowly, and now, I don't think you can see it, but the inside surface here is really good. You can
Tom,
tell. There was a lot of tear out there before, and there is not now, so that looks pretty good. The next step is, oh, I'm sorry, question?
is the angle on that scraper about the same as any other scraper?
The angle of the scraper face is, my scrapers are about 80 degrees. So let me see if I can get this in the right place to show it. Somehow, there, we're getting close. Yeah, there, you see the angle of the scraper is not quite vertical. It's about 80 degrees instead of 90 degrees. But my scrapers, I like about 80 degrees. I was amazed when Alan Lacer was here. He made the case that scrapers should be much sharper, a much greater angle. I didn't change. Alan Lacer is a smart guy and he's well experienced, but I did not change because I was used to what I was doing and it works well for me. But I think it's probably a lot of what you get used to and how you learn to do stuff, and that makes a huge difference. But that for me seems to work okay, and that's what I've kept. Now let's measure that once again, because I've gone in a little deeper. That is, it's just a 32nd of an inch fatter than 5/8. So there's 5/8. I am just about at the top, right there at where the thickness of the top part. Frankly, I'm going to go in just a little bit more, the dreaded one more cut, but I'm going to go in one more time because I want to make this top just a little thinner. You'll see why when we turn it around. Not much. I don't want to overdo it here. Okay, so now I'm going to grab a little piece of sandpaper, and this piece of 150 right here will work quite nicely. That's 80. And all I want to do is just touch up this edge. This outer edge is real fuzzy. Oh, I remember one other thing I want to show you too. Okay, so there, the outer edge is all cleaned up. There's one other thing I want to show you that I always do on my grommets, and that's I curve the bottom edge, this inside edge. The reason for that is because on the bottom, I don't want a cable to be chafing. If it goes down through the hole and then curves around underneath, it can chafe on the bottom of the hole as easily as on the top. But if I make this skirt exactly the same thickness as the tabletop or the shelf, and then have a curved edge on the bottom here, problem solved. So how do I do that? Easy. I use my bowl gouge once again. Go in here, and I can do just a light cut. And I can even roll this over and use it as a scraper to curve that side just a little bit. And then I usually sand this thing too at this point. So I reach in and I get sand the inside. This is your only chance to sand the lower part of the inside of the skirt. And it needs to be sanded. It needs to be sanded pretty well because that part's going to be visible. So 80 grit, 100 grit, and you see I can go around this curve a little bit too. 150 grit, and generally I find 150 grit is as far as I need to go for the applications I've done in the past. Okay, now you see there's a little bit of a mark up there. So let's see if I can get that out just a little bit. Use a cleaner spot on my sandpaper. What you're trying to get out mostly is a tear out. You've eliminated a lot of it by taking that scraper and going in very slowly, very light cut, and now it's in pretty good shape. There's still some tear out. I'm not going to worry about that because it's a demo piece. But if you're making these for someone, take the time to do it right. Okay, so this is ready to come off. So I'll unscrew the grommet, unscrew the screw chuck, and then put on my 4-jaw chuck. Now here's where a one-way chuck is nice. The jaws of the one-way chuck are straight up and down. They're not dovetail jaws. A dovetail set of jaws could be a little problematic here because it may not hold it quite as well as you'd want. Because of the nature of the dovetail, it's going to hold it way up inside, right under the top, which may be okay. I haven't tried it because I don't use dovetail jaws, but you put your grommet in here and tighten this up on the skirt. Bring up your tool rest, and then the next step is to hollow this out. The way you could do it like a bowl. Now you could just come in here and just start hollowing like a bowl. What I usually do, I'll show you. I usually just cut out that center. Look down here over the top so you know you're well inside the skirt. And use your parting tool. Now listen for the change of sound. Hear the change of sound? That means you're getting real thin. And boom. It just comes right out. It's perfect. Perfect. Every time you do it. Haha, almost. Okay, so now I'll go back to my bowl gouge. I want to round the top of this thing. So I'm going to round this part down into the inside and find the match so that as I round down, I'm matching the inside. Take a look at it and see how close I'm getting. Yeah, I've got a little ways to go. Another little cut here. Okay. So now I can go in here with the bottom edge. If you roll your bowl gouge over, there we are. You can, instead of having the flute open like you do normally, roll it over. So now you have a top edge and a bottom edge, a top edge and a bottom edge. And you can use that as a scraper and just come around very gently and clean that surface up. On the outside, you can cut this kind of doing the same thing, and you're just continuing that curve down and around to the bottom edge of the flare at the top. And then use a little sandpaper to clean it up. Sand it as much as you like. See, you can sand down into the inside of this ring, this grommet from up here. You just can't go clear the bottom because it's kind of up against the inside of your chuck. So that's why you have to be sure to sand the inside of the bottom of the, let me say it this way, the bottom of the inside of your grommet before you take it off the first time, before you take it off that screw chuck. So it's not finished sanded. It would take some more sanding. You know what sanding is like. Let's take it off of there and see how it looks. Okay, so I know it fits in there, so it should fit in here. Hope it does. I hope it fits. Oh man, I love it when the plan comes together. And there, now I'll show you the bottom. Because I wasn't paying attention when I made up the blank I just grabbed a piece of poplar and cut rounds. But I would have made that so that the thickness of the wood for the grommet was the thickness of the board plus the thickness of however I wanted to make this bead on the top of it. Okay, so if this was 3/4 of an inch, I'd probably want maybe 3/16 or even a 1/4 inch on the top. So a 1 inch thick piece for a 3/4 inch board probably would have been about right. And as you can, I think you can see, the inside of this is tapered. So if that did come all the way down, and I think I can show you on the other one anyway. Boy, it fits nicely. Really fits nicely. Really tight. I'm sorry? Oh, good point. Yeah, probably can. Good idea. Thanks, Lisa. Lisa and Dan are here, by the way. They're in balcony seating on the trailer, if you guys remember my shop. So I put this one in, press it all the way in. There, that's good. So now you can see this is curved right at the bottom of the shelf, okay? And you can see that the cable would be protected at that point.